Okay, so now let's talk about AWS Single Sign-On, or SSO for short, which is the next evolution for really managing single sign-on across your AWS accounts and applications. So you are going to get access to multiple accounts using a single login, as well as at the single login is going to give you the access to any commonly used business applications. So this is SAML 2.0 compliant SSO. Okay, so this is what happens when you log into a single sign-on SSO. You are going to get access to this portal, and then after logging in, you can get access to any console you want. Dropbox, Office 365, Slack, and so on. So it is integrated with S organizations. So that means that any account added to your organization can be enabled for signing through SSO. And for the identity source, you have multiple options. The first one is you use the SSO built-in user management. So you define your users and your groups within single sign-on. And I use it personally for my accounts, but also if you have corporate account, then you can use AD Active Directory through directory services using a managed directory for Microsoft AD or an AD connector. And also this in the very next slide or the last one is to like the use an external identity provider. So you can use any kind of SAML 2.0 identity provider such as Azure Active Directory, Okta Universal Directory, and so on. So it's also going to give you a centralized permission management for the users and your accesses, and then any activity happening within SSO will be seen in the CloudTrail, which is good. For example, if you wanted to alert based on the user signing activities. So what is the difference between SSO and the older assume role with the SAML? You will see SSO is quite easy. So SSO has to be integrated with an identity store, and then your clients will sign into SSO. Then we will retrieve credentials directly back from SSO after verifying the login, of course, and then the client can access AWS. That's because SSO actually hides a lot of complexity of what happens behind the scenes. In comparison, when you have assume role with SAML, then the client has to perform its own login against own identity provider. So your identity provider, so your IDP. So this is something you have to set up in place first. Then you get SAML assertions back from your identity provider IDP, and then you would go ahead and trade the SAML assertion for the STS service to get temporary credentials, and then finally you can access AWS. So single sign-on SSO is really acting as your own identity provider, your own portal, and SSO will perform the heavy lifting as well as of talking to the STS service. So it's much easier to set up, and for having used it, I cannot live without it now. So here now, so when you have Active Directory, how does it work? So well, in your cloud, you are going to set up an integration between your single sign-on service and Active Directory. Single sign-on service and Active Directory. I'll show you how in the next slide, and then your users will sign into the SSO portal. Make sure that they are logged into your Active Directory, and then they get SSO access to your accounts. SSO access to your accounts within your organizations or business applications or any SAML 2.0 based applications. Now, how do you integrate with Microsoft Active Directory? Well, you get here the multiple options. First one is to use AWS Managed Microsoft AD. So it's an AD that lives within your cloud, in which way, while it's super simple to set up SSO, and it otherwise if you have an on-premise AD, you can still use a managed Microsoft AD, but then you have to set up a two-way trust between your Microsoft AD and your on-cloud managed Microsoft AD, and that works. So, or if you don't want to set up a two-way trust, you can use a AD connector to your on-premise AD, in which case, all the calls are going to be proxies through your AD connector, and then SSO can easily integrate with Microsoft Managed AD or AD connector. So that's it for the SSO. It's really a cool service to understand, and it's the next evolution for the SSO and AWS. I really like it and I hope you understand it now. I will see you in the next lecture.